Hey there, welcome back. I'm Natalie Dayton with A Ray of Sunlight, and today I'm going to show you how to take this dresser and turn it into this. This is what the dresser looked like before I got my hands on it. It was pretty scratched up, as you can see. There were scratches on the top, scratches on the sides, scratches on the drawer fronts, and there was even a nice gouge in the corner of it, on that one corner. But it was only $15, and I thought that it was a super cute little dresser, and I really liked the little bottom part where the legs are. First things first, I removed the hardware, and I just have to say for a second, I absolutely love this electric screwdriver. It's called the Dremel Go, and it makes screwing and unscrewing things so easy. You just push it in, and depending on your settings, it will either unscrew or screw in the screws for you. Anyways, I don't know about you, but I think that this hardware is some of the ugliest hardware out there, and it was not going back on this dresser. So what I did after I removed the hardware is I grabbed some quick wood, and I love this quick wood. It is honestly the very best product that I have found to fill hardware holes. So all you do is this quick wood comes in a little tube, and you just break off a piece. Technically, you're supposed to like cut it off, but I always just break it off because I never have a knife around. And then you just knead the quick wood together until it's all the same consistency of color. And then all you do after that is shove it in the hardware holes. I just filled in one hardware hole for each handle, and I left the outer hole open so then I could replace the hardware with knobs. I also filled that little gouge on the corner with quickwood as well. Quickwood takes about an hour to dry before you can sand it, and so I moved on to sanding the top of the dresser. Now, I wanted to sand it down to bare wood because I planned on staining it, and I also wanted to get rid of those scratches. I sanded it with 100 grit, then 150 grit, and then 220 grit. And then I did wipe it down and get it nice and wet. And then after it dried, I went back and I sanded it with 220 grit again, just to make it even more smooth than before. Once the quickwood was dry, I took my sander to it and sanded all of the quickwood down nice and smooth and flush with the rest of the wood. While I was sanding, I realized that I totally forgot to actually wipe down the dresser and get rid of all of the gross grime and grease, and it was kind of gross, I'm not gonna lie. I totally forgot to do that, and so I hurried and grabbed my Crud Cutter. It's my favorite cleaning product to get rid of the grease and grime, and I sprayed the Crud Cutter all over the dresser and then used a damp old rag that probably has holes in it and wiped it down and scrubbed all of the grossness off of this dresser. Fun fact, this dresser is not all real wood. If you look right here on the inside, you can see that the panel on the side of the dresser is actually particle board. And since I wanted to use milk paint, powdered milk paint, I had to treat this panel on each side of the dresser a little bit differently than the rest of the wood. So I went ahead and I sanded those two panels with 220 grit sandpaper. Back with my vacuum and sucked up any dust that was left behind, any chips that still needed to come off. I also just painted a little bit of water-based poly over all of the quickwood spots just to make sure that the milk paint wouldn't chip right in those areas. Finally, it was time to get out the paint and the stain and start making this thing pretty. I started with staining the top. Now first, before I stain anything, I always like to use this wood conditioner. It just makes the wood stain actually stain evenly. And so basically you just apply it and then you let it sit for about 5-10 minutes and then you wipe away any excess. Then I used this special walnut wood stain by Minwax, and I just wiped it on with a lint-free rag, wiped it nice and even, and let it soak into the wood. For this project, I used Shackteau Interiors milk paint in Blue Moon. And if you're not very familiar with milk paint, this type actually comes in a powdered form that you have to mix with equal parts water before you can paint it on. It's super easy though, I promise. All you do is you mix the same amount of powder with the same amount of water, and I like to just put them in a container with a screw-on lid. Screw the lid on and then shake it up for a couple of minutes, and then you're good to go. You do need to let it sit for about 10-15 minutes to let it all thicken up a little bit. One thing though is milk paint, once it's mixed up, it doesn't last very long. So really, you should only mix it up in like half cup increments or less. I wish that I would have just mixed it up with a half cup, because I ended up using a whole half cup. I had to go back and mix up more paint halfway through this. So once it's mixed up, just let it sit for 10-15 minutes. Keep prepping, getting things ready to go, and then after 10-15 minutes, you're ready to brush on the paint. While I waited for the paint to set up, I taped off my drawers so then I wouldn't have any messy paint lines on the drawers. I just used this painter's tape, taped the side of the drawers, and then just because of how the drawer was, I taped the top of the drawer a little bit separately, and I did that for all 4 of the drawers. I also didn't want to get any paint on my freshly stained top, so I also put some painter's tape on the bottom of the top, and then I folded it over a little bit so then it wouldn't get into the way of painting the bottom, and I did that for all 3 sides. I used my favorite round zebra brush to paint on the milk paint. After each drawer front was painted and the areas right around it were painted, then I opened up the drawers with a screwdriver and painted the tops and the sides of the drawers right there on the drawer front. Then I left the drawers open just a little bit so then the paint wouldn't dry and make the drawers get stuck. I've had that happen before and it is no fun. After that first coat of milk paint dried, I could see little spots where it was starting to chip, and I got really excited. But there were still some places that needed a second coat, so I went back over everything before I chipped off any of the paint and gave it a good second coat so there was full coverage everywhere. That second coat of paint usually creates even more chipping than the first coat of paint. Where there was that laminate particle board stuff, there was just way too much chipping. It was coming off way too easily, and so I had to do something about it. I gave the whole dresser a quick sanding down with 220 grit, hoping to get more chipping on the front, and then just to smooth out and create more adhesion on the sides of the dresser where it had chipped way too much. After everything was sanded, I went back with my vacuum and sucked up any dust that was left behind, any chips that still needed to come off, and then I wiped it down with a lint-free rag again. Typically, if you don't want milk paint to chip, you can add Extra Bond to the mixed up milk paint, and it will basically act as a primer and it will make your milk paint stick better. But I was almost out of paint because I've used this paint on another project before. So instead of mixing it with the paint, I just put it straight on to the dresser, just in the areas that needed to stick more. After the Extra Bond dried, I went back with 2 more coats of milk paint and just painted over those areas that had the Extra Bond on it. Then I sanded everything smooth again and got all the chipping off again with 220 grit sandpaper, wiped it all down nice and smooth, and got all the dust off of it too. I was finally happy with how it chipped, and so I moved on to sealing the milk paint. I ended up using this wax from the Real Milk Paint Company. Honestly, I was really impressed with how it went on, and I will probably be doing this again. It was so easy. I put a glove on my hand and then I put an old sock that has holes in it over the glove, and then I just dipped my hand in the wax, spread it all over, wiped it all down, made sure that it wasn't too thick, but the wax really soaked up into the milk paint really fast. I can definitely see myself doing this again. I typically like to use water-based poly over my milk paint to seal it. I just really like the durable finish that it provides, but I've noticed in the past that the water-based poly actually makes the milk paint chip even more, which typically I don't mind that, but on these laminate panels, I didn't want it to chip even more. To finish it off, I made these cute little leather poles, and I will link that video right up here. It's really amazing to me every single time how much the hardware really makes or breaks a piece. That wraps it up. If you like what you saw, please hit the subscribe button and the bell notification next to it. And I will see you again for another makeover.